Hi there, and welcome to Faith for Finances. My name is Sam Piercy. I am your host, and this week I am very excited to welcome my special guest, Rich Orzol. And Rich and we are going to talk about right before the financial breakthrough, specifically, how do you fund your business idea? So, welcome, Rich. Thank you for coming to the church house.
I appreciate that.
Good. We appreciate you coming out in the rain and everything. So let's start off. Let me ask you to share with everybody a bit about your background, because you have a very, very wide background in sales and marketing and business.
Yeah, I'm originally from the United States in New York. Awesome. And went right into finance and been in that for some 35 years now. Mm-hmm. And I work for IWG Corporate Services as mostly their business development manager. And we, like you're saying, we help business owners. That's majority of who we deal with. Help them build their companies from originally their startups, sometimes mid-level, all the way to succession and exit.
Exactly. So both you and I are no strangers to business and finance.
True.
One of the things that I really liked about what you shared in your bio is the relationship. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to talk about is I'm going to get you to share the story that kind of inspired this discussion. Okay. But I also want to talk about the value of relationship, and so that we can ask some questions and help people understand where do you start and how do you do this kind of thing. So can you share how it is that we got to this point where we were going to share with the world? There was a story.
Yeah, well, basically it started several months ago, and there was a product, a disinfectant, that was brought to our attention. And there were not a lot of probably what I would consider non-believers. Mm-hmm. People, they would love to have a company already and, halfway to, and they're providing with their revenue. Yeah. But it's tough for a startup. And unfortunately, then you have to go back and you almost like have to peel the onion back. You have to start looking to see what people that you know. They always call it sometimes the top 100.
The top 100,
to see who that you know. Mm-hmm. And then you have to figure out from there, because they're going to ask you certain things. They want to know, they know about the product, which is kind of nice, mm-hmm. which is a good thing. But sure. What they also want to know, do you have a management team? Do you have your business plan in place? Because they're not just going to sit there and write you a check for sometimes just an idea that's in your head. They want to see a plan that goes along. They want to know how strong is your management team. They want to know who's going to be in what I would say the responsible for sure. the product, who's going to do the advertising. Then they want to know, what's going to happen with the money that's coming in when it comes in. How is it going to be dispersed? Then ultimately the investors would like to know how they're going to be paid back.
Right. So we had a great story mm-hmm. and a great opportunity. And typically what happens is people, that's what draws them in. Mm-hmm. But what Rich and I started to talk about was now you get into the management team and the Correct. Marketing and the these kinds of things. Because if you got a great story and you got a great product and you need funding, mm-hmm. now you got to be able to back that up.
Correct.
And that's what we want to talk about. I mean, really, it's faith for finances. So we're doing business with Jesus here, because we're taking something you can't see and we're bringing it right down. And it's like, okay, we can pray, but still we got to get down to business.
Correct.
So you said we need to have management team, we got to have cash flow, we got to have some mm-hmm. of these kinds of things. So this particular story, great story, great opportunity, mm-hmm. everything was there, but they were stuck. They needed money so that they could take advantage of it.
Correct.
So what happened?
Well, basically, we had the product, like we said. Yeah. Nobody didn't not believe in the product. Right. Everybody was like, great, this would be fantastic. Yeah. And we're like, wow, this will be real easy. People will be just, dropping checks off at our door.
Yep.
Not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. Yep. So you have to go back again to the very beginning and you trace your steps back and you yep. figure out, okay, what do we need that we didn't have?
Yes.
And we had to keep looking at that. Fortunately, there were a few, what I'd say, ideas or things that happened that we didn't anticipate.
Okay.
Because most of the time when you look at an investor, they want purchase orders. But then the investors also want, like we said, they want the corporate mandate. They want everything from A to Z, all the way through, to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, because they want to protect their investments.
Sure.
We happen to be very lucky in this particular case because there were some issues throughout the world all of a sudden took place.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we started to get some flood of purchase orders.
Right.
And with purchase orders, now all of a sudden you have investors. And it's really funny because we couldn't get that. And then all of a sudden they're knocking at our door.
Yeah.
And then we're in a position to say, well, hold a minute. Now we don't really need that investment that we did before.
Yeah.
We are now in the driver's seat. We can determine in
Right.
that particular case.
Now, there was a situation, obviously, that caused all those purchase orders to come. So
Correct.
for many people, though, they've got the great idea. People can see that it's a great idea. They know they need money, and the catch-22. So let's talk about what somebody can do to get a purchase order so that they can get the money, to get the money so they can get the purchase order. When you get caught in this catch-22, then in your experience, what do you think somebody might be able to do?
Well, I think what you have to do is not who you are, but who you know.
Yeah.
You have to go back and you have to start, and like I say, you're knocking on doors.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go online and use every resource that you can find, whether it's through the social media,
Yeah.
to figure out who's a person that can be influential, that can have that. Because what we found is there's a lot of people out there that say they have the money,
Yeah.
but they don't have the money.
Sure,
They
yeah.
know people that have the money.
Yeah.
So finding the people that have the money is the tough part. And then persuading them and showing them that you are a good business person, you're well organized, you have everything in place to be successful.
Sure.
So you do need to start figuring out where you can ask and who you can ask.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things you have to be, like one of my motto is, you have to be very persistent and you have to be very patient. This doesn't happen overnight. They're not just gonna throw money at you in a day.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to build the relationships with the different people, show them who you are, what your product is, and build value in it.
Right.
And so
Unless
you have
you
to be
already
creative.
have the purchase orders.
Right. But that's that's an unusual
Yes.
to have that happen like that.
Yeah. Well, that was in a big scale. So, I mean,
Right.
that's a $250,000 issue that turned
Correct.
into multi-millions. But you
Absolutely.
could bring that right down to a $25 issue.
Mm-hmm.
I have shared the story many, many times about the very first book that I ever wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I pre-sold it for Christmas.
Right.
And so there was a very real deadline, and then things were delayed and delayed and delayed. But that pre-sales is what enabled all of the investment in the production and the graphics,
Absolutely.
et cetera. And then because we had a deadline, we had to chop. And I remember driving around town delivering whatever I could right before Christmas. But it was the pre-sales, and that was on a $25 issue. So one of the themes of MoneyMinding is how you do anything is how you do everything. And the small things repeated consistently produce the biggest results in the shortest amount of time. So you and I are having this conversation because you called me and you said, who do you know that might know somebody that might know somebody? And I just had that conversation actually twice before today. Who do you know that might know somebody that might know somebody? Somebody called me about a completely unrelated thing. They have an automobile issue, and they were praying, and God said, call Sam. And it was, I know nothing about any of that sort of stuff. But I did happen to have a friend that knew somebody that knew somebody.
Correct.
So it's why community is so important. So in this case, they got a purchase order, and then that's all they needed to get going.
Correct.
Because then they were able to get pre-funded. So getting prepaid is one way that people can get funding on a business. They
Absolutely.
still needed to have the details, though. So let's talk about some of the details that people need to have. You said management team, business plan, cash flow, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
What do you think is...
Well, because with investors now, with all the securities acts, you can't just turn around and just get a check from somebody and that's it.
Yeah.
Because then there's going to be issues and lawsuits and things that have to be involved. So you have
Yeah.
to do it strictly by the rules and regulations and the laws that are provided for you.
Yes.
But you have to know those as well.
Yes.
That's why there's a lot of business owners that have great ideas, but they know their product, but they're not business
Yes.
owners. And that's the issue that we run into all the time.
Yeah.
So that's where you have all the agreements. Everything needs to be in writing.
Yeah.
And you have the from your legal advice all the way down the line. And
Yeah.
if you don't have that in place, it's all your corporate structure.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to have.
And that's what you guys do in business, right?
Absolutely.
IWG Corporate Services.
Yes.
Is to help people with that structure and to get all of those pieces in place.
Right.
And having it in writing, a letter
Right.
of understanding is one of those things that I've been teaching for years and years and years too, even when I was still managing money, is to, if you don't have the proper legal piece of paper, at least start with a agreement that's in writing, that everybody understands what the intention is, and then you can start to, because that will determine your cash flow, right? You get it in writing, and then you can see it, then you can all agree on it, and you can say, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, this is why we're going to do it, this is our expected results, this is how we're going to get out of it, I guess.
Well, it's your roadmap.
Exactly.
It's how we're going to treat each other, your job descriptions, what's going to happen with the money, what's going to happen in the future,
Yeah.
what happens if there's a situation, because there's always something that goes awry.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. But having everything in writing that way, it makes everybody's life a lot easier.
Sure. I mean, I think it's so easy to get caught into the story and forget that at some point this is all about creating cash flow, creating wealth, and at some point that wealth is created because you got to get out of it. To
Right.
the exit strategy. You want to comment on
Well, your
some of
succession
that?
planning, your exit strategies.
Yeah.
How long do you want to have this? Do you want to be bought out? Do you want to have someone come in and just write you a check for the company?
Yeah.
But then also you have to figure out, because a lot of people, what they do, they'll have their businesses and figure they've been working on them for maybe sometimes long period of times, other short periods of time.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden there's money.
Yeah.
What happens with that money?
Yeah.
Where does it go? And there's tax implications as well. And
Sure.
people have to be, know that there are going to be issues with that. And sometimes it's a shame too, because money does change people. So by having everything in writing, then you don't run into that.
Yeah, we've got the not having money, and then we have the having money, and then
All of a
everything in
sudden.
between, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm going to hold up our MoneyMinding decision-making process. We have the planning side, and then we have the decision-making side, because we have the business owner who has their own set of criteria, and then we have the investor. And so for a business owner, whether that's a single person with an idea that they just want to get launched and they're trying to figure out where the money's going to come from to do that, or a big business that's now waiting for a big multi-million-dollar investor or multi-million-dollar purchase order, there's two sides to the coin. There's two people involved, and
Right.
both of them have their financial planning, their financial objectives. They're both in there to make a profit and to overflow and to share and to fulfill their purpose. And so understanding how to do that is obviously an important thing. Can you comment on maybe you can, the management team in this particular case? They started off small, they built their way up. And do you know whether there's an exit strategy in place? Like, did they start with the end in mind and then work backwards? And because you were talking to investors, like, is that a
Most
pretty-
don't.
Most don't.
Most
yeah.
do not have that. They're living right here, right today and now. They're not thinking 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And that's where we come into play to say these are things that you have to put into place from A
Perfect.
to Z.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, next thing you're going to find out that you're already there and you're not ready to be
Sure,
there.
yeah.
And if you just would have been done a little bit more preparation, then there'll be less consequences, and it'll be a smooth exit or a smooth retirement or a smooth sale. And that's what, and unfortunately, because most of the time when there's businesses, it usually starts out one or two people.
Yeah.
And it's good because
Yeah.
it's pretty easy. You can communicate between two people.
Sure.
It's when the business owner is getting ready to go to that next level, when there's going to be a third or fourth person that's hired. Now it opens up a whole different avenue
Right.
to where you have to have all new contracts. And that's when trouble begins.
Gotcha. Because then everybody has to agree. So
True.
that's when you start looking at the corporate structure. Do you think that people start off either thinking too small or thinking too big Do you think that people can get stuck thinking, oh, I got to have all this in place, and then it stops them?
Well, I think the biggest thing is they don't know the questions to ask.
Gotcha.
They don't know because they've never been there before.
Good point.
So that's the biggest problem that we see. They're not prepared for this.
Gotcha.
It's something they don't know a question to ask. They don't know a certain, what contracts or documents or anything that they need in place because they're not aware of that. They've been so focused on their business, they're not focusing on
Right.
what
Which
else
is
has
what
to
you
take
want.
place.
You want people to focus on their
Right.
business, but we want them to focus on the big picture and the little picture, and then to start asking questions, which of course is the
Right.
thing that I keep talking about again and again and again, is the community, is building community. And as the community prospers, so do you. So that always thinking about what's in it for somebody else. And not just what's in it for you, but that overflow and who's going to be impacted.
Very true.
Yeah, so where would somebody start? Do you have any recommendations on how you would get started, whether you're a small business or a big business?
Well, the
Dealt
first,
with both.
and there's no book that you can open.
No.
That, there's no Business 101 that tells you the exact, the business
Yeah, the
plan, or the
Bible's
roadmap.
got there's got
Yes.
lots of entrepreneurial stuff, but it doesn't necessarily say start here.
Right.
And you can start in Genesis and go to Revelation, but it's, where do you start, right?
And then the nice thing is we're a multifamily office, so we have those people in place.
The professionals.
Yes.
Yes, perfect,
And that
yeah.
we can give you the roadmap to that, and that's
Sure.
the biggest thing. You need to start. Some people, they want to get moving so fast,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes what we got to do is pull it back just a little bit and say we need to do these
Yeah.
steps, step by step by step.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down, make sure you draw out that map, get everybody in place that needs to be.
Yeah.
And then it'll make their life a lot easier. But it's like anything else. If you skip a step, it's going to come back and get you.
Now, do you think people are afraid to ask?
Well, I think it's money. You have to remember
They're-
in the very beginning when you're starting out and
Yeah.
you're doing things, it's not like you have money to pay all the different people.
So they're afraid to spend money?
Probably.
Or afraid to
Or
spend it in
where
the
to
right...
spend the money.
Or where to spend the
Where
money.
to spend it. What should you do first? Because you'll hear it from a lot of different people. So that's why we say there's certain things that you need to have in place that are non-negotiable. And then you can move on from there. And as you
Such
make
as?
money, then you can spend in different areas to build the business.
Gotcha,
But
okay.
you do have to have certain things in place right out of the gate.
So what would those things be?
Well, you have to have a sound business plan.
Yeah, business plan.
A slide deck helps because if you don't have a business plan and a slide deck, investors are not even going to look at you because
Gotcha.
you're not speaking their language. They
Okay.
want it in a certain format.
Yeah.
Then you pretty much have to know the organization in terms of who your management team is going to be, who's responsible for what their job descriptions are, how they're going to treat each other.
Okay.
And then you also have to make sure that, okay, when we are making money, how is that money going to be spent? Is it going
Sure.
back into the business?
Okay.
Where is that money going to be? Then you have to be thinking, okay, what do we have to do to grow?
Yeah.
And that's a major thing. All your advertising.
Yeah.
What's going to happen
Advertising
with advertising?
costs, yeah.
Which because regardless of what you do, there's going to be money well spent, and most
who's
people
gonna
know
do it,
that.
yeah.
And usually people know that if they think it's going to cost $5, it costs $10.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for
Or
that.
15, yeah.
But on one of the other major things is you have to have really good communication. This is where most businesses fail.
Communication with staff, communication with...
Well, amongst
investors.
you have to have the attorneys, the bookkeepers.
Gotcha.
You have to have everybody that's in charge there, the HR departments, and that's one big area where I think most of the businesses starting out don't understand about the human resources department. That's all those contracts that people don't understand. For instance, even right now, social media contracts. What
yeah.
pictures can you post? What can you say? What can't you say? And that is very big right now.
Okay, so let's pull back.
Okay.
And go, you're a mom and pop, and you've got a widget. And this widget is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Okay, this widget is a way that you can get glasses for 50 cents, okay, whatever it is. So you know that it's scalable. So the 4 key words here are measurable, manageable, scalable, and sustainable. So that it has the potential to do that. So we're talking about HR agreements and contracting and funding and business plans and attracting investors, et cetera. And all you know right now is that you've got this amazing product and a great opportunity because nobody else is doing it. So any thoughts on where to start? so that people don't get overwhelmed and go, that's it, I can't do it.
Well, I think you have to know your market too. You have to know your audience.
Market research.
So
Okay,
make sure
awesome.
you do your research.
Okay.
Make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yeah.
Then I think the from there is figuring out who is going to be part of that team.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
that's so crucial.
So your team.
You have to have a good team around you.
Yes. Okay.
And then I think from when you go from there, then it's where you start putting it down in paper. This is where we are.
Yeah.
This is where we want to be. Because not everybody knows the how-to. They know where they are and they want to be.
Yeah.
It's the how-to that everybody's trying to find.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's the piece where you walk by faith. And that's the piece where you need the community. That's the piece where you bring Jesus right into that. And you go, okay, Lord, you gave me this amazing idea, this amazing opportunity. The part that I need to do is I need to write it down, write the vision, make it plain and clear, put it on paper so that even a runner could run with it. Though it may tarry, surely it will come to pass. That's Habakkuk 2:2. So we got to do that. Even not knowing how to start, even where to start, where to fund it, and what you need is the faith. That's why this program is called Faith for Finances, because there's so many ideas that get stuck in here. I don't have the money. I don't have the money. I can't do this, and it's going to cost me a $250,000, and I don't know anybody. Well, do you know somebody that might know somebody that might know somebody that can help you? And so you have, I mean, that's your business is IWG Corporate Services.
Yes, we find those people.
You find those
Yes.
people. So you find somebody that can find somebody that can find somebody.
Right.
And taking the one step and then the next step and the next step. So do you have any advice that you might share with people that have a great idea? Actually, we've got great ideas. What about people that have a business right now? And they're maybe listening to this and they're going, oh my goodness, I don't have this, I don't have that. And then they can start to feel the pressure of, oh, it's too big. But they know that if they had more money, they could expand maybe. So do you have anything that you could share to people that have an existing business? Like what would they do? How do they start with that?
Well, I think you have to look at where you're going to get your advice from.
Ah, good point.
If you've built relationships, good, strong relationships with the right people in business,
Yeah.
then you always want to do what successful people are doing and avoid.
What if they don't?
Well, then, that's when you call like us. That's the tough part. Yeah.
Sure.
No, you
Yeah.
need to call, a firm similar to ours that know the steps.
Yeah.
Because we're going to sit down and we're going to look at everything from A to Z,
Yeah.
figure out what you have in place,
Sure.
and then figure out what you're lacking.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that in a multitude of counsel there is great wisdom, and the one thing that I have heard many years ago, in a multitude of counsel there is great wisdom, but in a multitude of counsel is not a multitude of opinions. So you've got to be careful about that. So people that don't live anywhere close to here, they want to figure out probably where to find somebody that shares their values or that can understand their vision, maybe. What do you?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think we're very fortunate in the era that we're living in that you can go online.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best place to start from there to ask the questions online.
What do I need?
Then go, and then you're going to have a circle of influence. You're going to
Yeah.
have a circle of friends that, like you said, that know a certain portion of the business.
Yes.
But then they'll refer to somebody else. So the
Yeah.
referrals is the way it's going to have to be. And then you can read, and you're just going to have to
Research.
research and build as much knowledge as you possibly can. And you might have to take pick people's brains.
Sure,
And
yeah.
ask-
And be
ask the
careful about who
businesses.
you pick,
Right.
though, too, because you don't want to ask not that I'm picking on brother-in-laws, but you don't want to ask your brother-in-law,
Right.
your neighbor necessarily. You want to ask them if they know somebody that's successful, because if it's $250,000 or $250 million, or even if it's $25 or $250, who you ask is important. So is what you ask. And then to just keep asking and to keep believing, and then to even ask what kind of information you need to get.
That's the
right?
tough part. That's usually the tough part, knowing what questions to ask.
Yeah.
Know where to begin, and then you have to kind of put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. So let's just close with this. So this great success story here. There was beating the pavement, and nobody
yes.
was biting. Oh, think about it. Send me some information. beaten. And then all
Oh,
of a
yes.
sudden, poof, the situation opened up and there's a prepaid purchase order and it's a great success story. The management team, as they were doing that,
You learn as you go.
so were I'm thinking of their attitude and were they continuing to go? Or you just
Well, you
fill
had
in
the
a little
belief
bit
in the
about-
product.
They believe in the product.
You have to
okay.
believe in it. If you don't believe in the product, it's going to show.
Okay, there you go.
You
Perfect.
have to have that.
Awesome. Really good. So my guest is Rich Orzol from IWG Corporate Services. They also do wealth services, which is why, which is amazing.
Yes.
Because the reason that we do all of this, sometimes people don't like the idea of God and money, but we need money to live off of, and God knows that, and He gives us the power to produce the wealth. And sometimes, He also gives us the creative ability to do that. And there's a lot of technical parts that we don't have to be good at them all. We don't even have to know what all those parts are, but we have to be willing to start. And how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you can do it for $25, you can do it for 25 million. Is really, I'm hoping that that's what people will get, and that all of that detail about contracts and corporate stuff is exactly the same process. You just got to come back and you just got to start.
Well, and it's better to ask for help than to make the mistakes, because sometimes you could have a
man.
great idea, but you could sink that ship very quickly with some bad advice or some bad decisions.
Sure.
Especially financially.
Yeah, we've been there. So, and who you trust.
Yes.
Yes, and just to keep and pay attention to that. Learn as you go and document it. So we want to invite you to take a journey with us to explore what you can do, maybe beyond what you can currently ask or think, and just to be open to new financial possibilities. So this is Faith for Finances, and we look forward to sharing so much more with you in the weeks ahead. And you can find out more about Rich and IWG Wealth Services, and come on in and ask the questions, or better yet, learn what kinds of questions to ask. So Rich, thank you so much, and
My pleasure.
we look forward to talking soon.
Good.
Take care, and God bless.